Okay, hey gang, let's clean the lens a little. Might have made it worse. Oops. Don't clean the lens with your shirts, guys. So I just sat down to watch the Game Changers documentary. A lot of people are talking about it, so I wanted to watch it. I feel like I'm especially hearing a lot of people in the CrossFit community talking about it, or maybe that's just my circle, I don't know. I know a couple people that have now gone vegetarian because of it. So I wanted to sit down and watch it, and then after we watch it, or after I watch it, I am then going to try and adjust my diet for a week based on what this documentary suggests. So here are the things I think before going into this documentary. 1, despite being not great about eating vegetables myself, I do believe that a plant-based diet is good for everyone. And plant-based is different than vegetarian or vegan, so let's just make that point. But I do think plant-based is good for everyone. 2, I do eat meat. So that's basically where I'm at. I don't really know what else this documentary is gonna cover, so I guess let's just watch it and see what happens.
His philosophy was simple. Research your own experience. Absorb what is useful. Reject what is useless. Add what is specifically your own. That's when I stumbled across a study about the Roman gladiators.
We know different food sources give different amounts of strontium in the bones. High strontium levels in vegetarians, low strontium levels in carnivores. The gladiators were predominantly vegetarian.
To think that the original professional fighters ate mainly plants went against everything I'd been taught about nutrition.
I will admit that I did read one article, but it's because I was looking up who was behind the documentary. But there was a couple other fact checks in this article, and I do want to share one with you about the gladiators. You'll notice they've said mainly vegetarian and that they mainly ate plants, but nobody's saying they didn't eat meat. And the whole strontium test thing is completely leaving out the option of being an omnivore. And even if you include omnivore in this strontium test, there's a huge overlap between the strontium levels. I think their wording was a little bit deceptive.
James, does Superman eat meat?
Yes.
He does?
Yeah.
Oh. Could you tell us what sort of foods you eat at tea time when you come home?
Nearly the same as dinner, but egg and lamb chop.
Do you think all the other children should eat those sort of foods?
Yes.
In order to get strong?
What a weird interview to have as a kid.
Because their perception was that the protein is what sustains their energy. But in fact, that's not the case. The actual energy for exercise comes mainly from carbohydrates in the form of glycogen that we store in our muscles.
Well, I thought everybody knew that. That's why all the high school teams had pasta dinners before the big games, right?
Nate Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel? Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
It was simply a battle of energy in there, and he got the better of that, so.
9 days out from the fight, I started eating 2 steaks a day, and it just came back to bite me on the ass, you know?
This was the greatest upset in UFC history, and it turned out Nate wasn't the only plant-based fighter out there.
Okay, just really quick. Conor McGregor also went up 2 weight classes to fight Nate Diaz. And granted, Conor McGregor probably shouldn't be eating that many steaks. I agree that that's not the best diet, and he probably did need more carbs and more like whole foods and not just a shit ton of red meat. But he's also like 15 to 20 pounds lighter than Nate Diaz, and that shit matters when you're in a fight.
Where do you get your protein? As if everybody that's in KFC is looking at the back of a bucket, like, yeah, how much protein is, y'all don't know. So y'all really don't know what y'all eating.
I mean, that's true.
I've never really thought about it like that before. Controlled studies show that simply drinking beet juice before training allows subjects to cycle 22% longer and bench press 19% more total weight.
Guess what? You can drink beet juice and eat meat.
When I went plant-based, I thought that it would be a longer transition, but I just immediately started feeling like I could go kick ass.
But nobody's talking about how they ate before. Maybe they all had shit diets.
Let's go again and again. I was 39 and a half years old when I stood on the Olympic podium.
Oh, sports stories get me every time. I almost just shed a tear.
Going over some of the most remote stretches, I put in 26 hours straight. But the Appalachian Trail keeps throwing more and more mountains at you. It never really lets up.
Man, this guy is impressive.
You had about a 13% change in the hardness of your erections. Okay, let's look at how many or how long you had erections for.
Bro. Show it, dang it.
Yeah, don't hold out. Oh.
Bro, that's an hour, bro.
So you guys all had a very similar response.
This is, so this test and then the blood burrito test, right? I have similar issues with both. They never did a control, and they're also not taking into consideration what else they ate that day, if they trained, how well they're sleeping, did these guys watch porn? Like, there's just so many other factors that go into these things. You cannot base it on one time with one meal.
An 8-week weight training trial also found that those consuming a normal amount of carbs gained 2.9 pounds of muscle mass, while those in the low-carb group actually lost muscle.
Oh heck yeah, carbs are important, you guys. This is
low-carb diet. They're walking around like zombies. I'm backstage eating all the carbs that I want. They're like, how are you eating that right now when you look this shredded?
I agree with all that part, but it has nothing to do with taking protein out of your diet or taking animal protein out of your diet.
And I'm making truffle mac and cheese, buffalo wings, kale, Caesar salad, crispy Brussels sprouts with a smoked sauce reduction. And we'll finish off with the peanut butter cheesecake.
Man, all that stuff looks so good.
Now that playbook is being used by the food industry.
She's from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
They're gonna hire their so-called
I'm
experts
first of all a registered dietitian and nutrition scientist, and I'm a mom.
to create just enough confusion.
Are you saying with processed meat that it is not, in your view, carcinogenic?
I don't say that it supports a sufficient relationship.
And they make it seem as though there's doubt about what we're talking about.
I'm sorry. That's exactly what this documentary is doing. All the studies this documentary, I shouldn't say all, most of the studies this documentary is using are funded by Haas Avocado or the North America Tea Trade Association. Most of the doctors and experts that they're using in this documentary sell books about being a vegan or a vegetarian, or meal plans or supplements, or like, it just is, the hypocrisy in that section of the documentary is wild.
I saw a bull elephant that had had its face cut off. Tusks that had been taken. The whole elephant sitting there dead because some guy wants to have a tusk on his desk. I started to realize that every day I was going out on patrol and protecting one animal and coming home at night and putting another animal on the fire. And I knew I was full of shit. This whole fantasy that we need meat to get our protein, it's actually bullshit. I just stick to plans.
I love this story, and it's
that we support,
the one part of this documentary that I can't criticize.
These endangered species.
The actual biggest threat we have is the meat industry and the land that they are continually taking away from what we have left.
The message is overwhelming, both for public health and environmental reasons. The more plants you can eat and the less meat and dairy you can consume, the better.
So that whole section on farming, like I said, I can't criticize it. I absolutely agree. I think if there's going to be a reason to go plant-based or to take it even farther and to go vegetarian or vegan, for me, that's it. That's the kicker. It's for the morality of it, the protection of our animals, and for the sustainability of it. But maybe that's just a whole other documentary entirely, and one that I probably don't want to watch.
It takes most hikers 5 to 7 months. Jurek did it in 46 days, 8 hours, and 7 minutes. 3 hours faster than the previous record.
Sports stories get me every time. Every time. Okay. So let's talk about what we just watched. Really quick, I wanna spit out one controversial opinion and or potentially controversial, maybe it won't be. These top guys, and I don't want to accuse anyone of doing anything they're not doing, but you know, all those bodybuilders and strongman, those are not drug-tested sports. That's all I'm gonna say. I wanna talk about one thing that not only applies to Game Changers, but many, if not all, of the documentaries about nutrition. Whether they're pro Game Changers or anti Game Changers, a lot of nutritional studies are just kind of pseudo-science-y. A lot of them are observational studies. Really, none of them use the scientific method. It's hard to create controls. It's hard to duplicate results. A lot of them are funded by major food companies. So that being said, if you know that going into this documentary, you just kind of, anything they say, anytime they reference a study or an article or this or that, or they do these weird bean burrito boner tests, you just kind of have to take the results and take the information with a grain of salt. Beyond the fact that they cherry-picked their science, I think this was the thing that was most frustrating for me. This documentary is not bad, and what they are suggesting is not bad. But I think they kind of went a little too far in the direction of making an enemy of meat, especially as it pertains to athletes. You know, they talked to all these athletes who went plant-based or went vegetarian or went vegan, and now their careers and their abilities are skyrocketing. And even the people I talked to in my real life are like, yo, yeah, you know, we changed, we just went plant-based, we're vegetarian now, and I feel great. I feel so much better. And what the documentary's not telling you is how they ate before. Maybe they weren't taking in enough calories. Maybe their diet was too low carb. You know, maybe they were eating too much and that's why they were feeling sluggish. Without knowing how they were eating before, you can't say that the improvement was only because they went plant-based. And so watching this documentary, you're kind of thinking like, well, we don't know. How are we to know? So the people in my real life, I asked them, do you think that maybe that new focus on your diet and that new attention to what you're putting in your body, do you think maybe that's why you feel better? And you feel better because you just weren't paying attention before? So before you weren't eating enough, or you were eating too much, or you were eating too much of the wrong stuff. And they were like, well, yeah, definitely. But here's what I'll say. If going plant-based or going vegetarian is what it takes for you to pay attention to your diet, and then you feel like that works for you and you feel like that's something that you can hang on to and do for a long time and it feels sustainable, then fine. I am not sitting here saying that plant-based or vegetarian is bad. It's not. It is a good diet. I just don't think that we can sit here and say, this is the only way to do it. In the grand scheme of things, they're showcasing all these athletes and they're saying, look at what these amazing athletes are doing and they don't eat meat. And I understand the message, right? Because I do think that we've all kind of been given this notion that vegetarians can't possibly be good athletes because they can't be strong or they can't have the right endurance. And I do think that that's untrue. You can be a good athlete and be a vegetarian. But you can also be a good athlete and be an omnivore. I think if you're gonna take away anything from this documentary, it should be this. Pay attention to what you're putting in your mouth. Have your focus be on plant-based and whole foods. And you can still be a good athlete without animal protein. I don't think you have to be plant-based or be vegetarian to be a good athlete, but I think it's possible to be a good athlete and to not have animal protein. Of course it is. It's all about making sure you're getting the right macronutrients and micronutrients. I wish this documentary was more pro-plant-based instead of being like pro-vegetarian and anti-meat, because I think those are two different things. I don't know if anything I just said made sense, but hopefully it'll cut together in a well-formed opinion. I don't know. Major takeaways are this documentary cherry-picked its science, and I will list some things in the YouTube description for you to see that. It's important to pay attention to what you're putting in your body, and your nutrition absolutely affects you as an athlete. And if you care about being a good athlete, you should focus on eating whole foods, and plant-based is a good idea, but don't think that you have to cut out meat entirely. And let's all remember that Bruce Lee quote: research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. Different things are gonna work for different people, and that's okay. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for part 2, where I change my own lifestyle and see what happens. See you next week.